Mr. Schulte, are you online? Mr. DeShock, are you online? Mr. Schulte or Mr. DeShock, are you online? All right, we got another minute or so.
Good morning, Bruce here.
Mr. Schulte, is that you?
Yes, it is. Good morning.
Okay, morning. Mr. DeShock, are you online? Mr. DeShock, are you online? Okay, Mr. Klinkhardt, are you online?
I am. I'm here at the IAMCO office with Ms. Craig.
Okay. Ms. Craig, are we recording yet?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. DeShock, are you online? Okay. He had mentioned something about he wasn't sure what his schedule was, so I know with the Bristol Bay fishery starting up, he could be quite busy. Okay, so I'm going to call the Marijuana Control Board meeting on Thursday, May 7th, 2020, to order at 11 a.m. Ms. Craig, could you call the roll, please?
Lauren Jones.
Here.
Nicholas Miller.
Here.
Christopher Jaime.
Here.
Bruce Schulte.
Here.
Casey DeShock.
Here.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Welcome. Good morning. Thank you. Is there any request for changes on the agenda? Okay, hearing none, then the agenda is approved. Our first item was to take any public testimony on the amendments to or the repeal of the emergency regulations 3 AAC 306750A and H transportation. I know this is going to be difficult for me and also for others, but try to figure out an orderly manner. But is there anybody online who wishes to testify on the proposed changes?
Mr. Chair?
Okay, once again, this is the Marijuana Control Board, and we're considering amendments to or repeal of an emergency regulation 3 AAC 306750A and H. Is there anybody listening in that wanted to testify on these changes? Okay, I'm hearing no. Yes.
Hi, this is Gary Evans with Gas Station 49. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good. I was shocked to see this come about in such a quick manner, but I would strongly testify against repealing these transportation laws and strongly urge to make it look impermanent. I think it only makes the industry safer, and it really saves businesses a lot of money as far as transportation goes. But with these in place, we have the ability to send stuff third party. I don't have to sitting on an airplane next to a 12-year-old with weed in the bins up top. It goes to a third party. It gets transferred to where it needs to go. You know, someone picks it up. It works way smooth. There's less hands touching it. There's all around less risk of people trying to, you know, potential theft, or, you know, and the amount of weight you can move to the rural communities at the other stores also changes significantly versus just 2 duffel bags you can carry with you on your person. I really see it only benefiting the industry as a whole. I know discretion is the key with the airlines and things like that, but I only see it being beneficial. I truly do.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wants to testify on these regulations?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, yes. Give your name for the record, please.
Jana Weltstein for the record.
Hi, Jana.
On the site, there really isn't any amendments. There's only the repeal. And so I just wondered, is the board not considering any edits to the language to address the concerns raised by the Department of Law? Perhaps edits like any person that has a commercial business license, any common carrier, those kinds of ideas, or are you only considering just repealing it?
Ms. Wilson, what we have before us is a repeal, but the board has not taken any action one way or the other, so the board may be wanting to do something differently, but all that we've been proposed at this point is repeal.
Okay, well, for public testimony purposes, I would just strongly testify against repealing this provision. Many of my clients have benefited from keeping their families safe by not having to go to other communities, and also keeping those communities safe by not having to physically go to all those other communities and risk spread of the virus. And also some of Mr. Evans' points where he pointed out, you know, it's not a good look for the industry to have marijuana in your carry-on when you're sitting next to a 12-year-old. Additionally, I am unaware of any negative impacts that have occurred due to the change in the regulations that allow for the type of transport we're considering. I haven't heard any reports of any misplaced product or stolen product or diverted product or anything of that sort. So I would just strongly recommend not repealing it and look more at, if there's concerns by the Department of Law, look more for an amendment that could satisfy those concerns.
Okay. Is there anybody else that cares to testify on these regulations?
I do.
State your name, please.
My name is Lisa Coates. I'm in Kenai, and I'm the managing owner of Urban Extract.
Okay.
I would just like to say thank you for these emergency regulations. It has cut down on our exposure, and not even related to flying on airplanes, but being able to do a handoff to a store or to someone from getting a product from A to B may require that handoff to someone, for example, in Anchorage, C, without our order and without us having to go into a store physically, put our inventory in their records, and it just cuts down on people that are needed to get our order from A to B. One thing I would like to suggest, if you do not repeal this, which I am strongly encouraging you not to, is Metric has a feature for additional drivers, but we don't, as a state, do not have it turned on. When we had our advanced training last fall, we were told that this was an option that the state just has to, that Metric works for the state of Alaska, so the state of Alaska has to tell them to turn on this feature. But if you turn on that feature, there won't be mistakes. The manifest won't get completed correctly, the chances of having all the information you want, who's going to drive, who's the second driver, what's their phone number, what's their marijuana handler permit number, all of that would have to be filling in the blank. So I would just think it would make it even that much better. So that's all I have to say, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Was there another person trying to get on?
Yes, please.
Your name, please?
This is Lacey Wilcox with the Alaska Marijuana Industry Association.
Okay, Lacey?
Hi, thank you. So, yeah, I agree with what Lisa just said there, too. Thank you guys for taking all the time. This has been a lot. So, I struggled a little bit to follow the earlier conversation. It was really choppy last week to understand what was really happening, what the issue is being raised with this particular reg. So, imagining that it is an issue and it's being raised by the Department of Law, I just would really encourage you guys to explore alternative language and not look straight to repeal, because it is working. It's an emergency regulation that has been effective. It is being utilized. It is, as Janet said, I haven't heard of any errors or gross mistakes or lost items. Maybe we're missing something. Maybe the dialogue will learn a little bit more today, but certainly as you go forward today, I would encourage that you not just go straight to repeal and that you explore an alternative language, because it is working for the industry. It's smart. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else online that wishes to testify on these regulations?
Yes, I would like to. My name's Mason Evans with Grass Station 49.
Okay, Mason.
Hey, I'd just like to bring up the point. One of the massive issues that we've run into running multiple locations is the sheer amount of product at times cannot fit in one vehicle. We cannot keep stores successfully pumped full of product. We can't meet demand at times. With these new regulations allowing us to ship product, we've been able to actually match the full potential of our stores for once, and we are seeing increased revenue. The state will see increased tax revenue, not to mention the safety burden. I have kids as well as hundreds of other people in this industry, and I know walking around with big old bags of weed and cash is getting old quick. I know that's what we signed up for, but we got a breath of fresh air here, and it was much appreciated, and I think the state as a whole, as well as the industry, and personal benefit to the workers and customers as far as health-wise, simply because you don't touch it as much. And the target that's not on your back, there are just a landslide of positives to this, and I really hope people take that into account. It's not a matter of if, but when somebody finally gets robbed and hurt. And I feel like we're tap dancing on that fine line, and this gave us a chance to maybe finally get away from that, and it would be a real shame to see that disappear. And that about sums up how I feel on the matter. I don't want to sound like a broken record. I'm sure there's going to be other comments, so appreciate you guys listening.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to comment on these regulations?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Devron Helling. My business name is Transcan Logistics. I respectfully ask the body to not repeal the emergency regulation for all those reasons the previous testifiers have mentioned. Plus, I think I would urge the board and the director to negotiate with Alaska Airlines. I don't see that that's happened. Perhaps it has. And any of the other transportation carriers, marine or air, that some understanding could be reached, some procedures clearly defined that we would all work within to again keep the chain of custody intact, to keep everyone safe, to keep us from traveling great distances. If you truly believe that the marijuana industry is a source of income for the state, please do the right thing. Repeal this. Don't repeal the emergency order. Rather, go into negotiations, come up with something that we all can abide by, and the state will benefit as well as our customers. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Is there anybody else who wants to testify? Okay, hearing none, I am going to close public testimony. and bring it back to the board for discussion. And Ms. Wilson, if you could come online and walk us through what we have in our packet, and if you could address some of the issues related to, and I think particularly the airlines.
Very good, sir. This is Joan Wilson, and I want to thank everyone who commented. I'll try to respond to all the points that were raised in those comments as well. It is true that what you have before you is a repeal of the emergency regulation. It's worded as an amendment and repeal because actually 750A needed to be amended to return us to our prior language. Why are we doing this? There is just in the subject of transportation too great of a divide about transporting what is a federally illegal drug. And in keeping things with our emergency regulations, we are putting the certificates of every carrier at risk. Those carriers deliver products that are necessary all throughout the state of Alaska. I was very much encouraged that, perhaps this is an issue of discussion with those carriers. It very well could be, but it's also a discussion with the body that regulates them, the federal government. And until we have, a better alignment between federal and state law on marijuana, this is just an area where I don't believe the state can be taking this progressive of an act. Now, as you know, I worked very hard to try to accomplish the aim of this because I believe in my heart and with full faith that the aim here was to prevent the spread of COVID-19 to communities, particularly those off the road system. What I'm also hearing, though, is it appears that this aim of encouraging or limiting that was basically taken beyond the scope of that. I've heard about travel, for example, on airlines between Anchorage and Fairbanks. I know that was not the intent of this board. Did we attempt to vet other language that might permit this, leaving the product in the hand of carriers without a handler permit? Yes, I vetted that many, many times. And for the time being, I can say all I can recommend from the Department of Law is repealing us to bring us to the current language. In addition, if we want to do more to limit the spread of COVID to small communities, the place to start with that is at the governor's office and to explain what the industry might need and somehow amend the travel mandates to address that. But I think our place of discussion is with the governor's office and eventually with the federal government and eventually with the carriers. But I cannot advise this board to continue an emergency regulation that is in direct contrast with federal law on the subject of transportation, which is separate from the subject of cultivating and testing and being a licensee in general of marijuana. So I don't know if that responds to all the questions. The emergency findings lay that out, and the revised regulations bring us back to where we are.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, Bruce Schulte.
Mr. Schulte.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate Ms. Wilson's comments, and I don't really disagree. I'm a professional pilot, and I had this dialogue with the Flight Standards Office in Anchorage, in Alaska, 2016, and I got some pretty specific direction from their attorney, which was, if we find a commercial pilot knowingly carrying marijuana, we're going to take action against his or her license, and we may go after the company's certificate. So I don't dispute at all what she's saying about the risk to these carriers. And to be honest, as a professional pilot, if somebody asked me to carry it, I probably wouldn't, because it's not, the risk to me personally is too great. However, most, if not all of what we're doing here is contrary to federal law. And so I'm sitting here, I'm listening to all the conversations, to the comments, to legal advice and everything, and I'm trying to find another solution. And I'm not getting there, to be honest. This entire industry statewide is contrary to federal law. We all know that. We've done everything we can to try and abide by federal guidelines on, diversion and so forth, and keeping organized crime out of it. I think we've done an okay job of that. But but the reality is we don't have any authority over federal law. We can't tell an air carrier you can or should or cannot carry these products. Well, maybe we could tell them you can't. We can't. They cannot. But since they're federally regulated, the state doesn't really have any authority over them at that level. So that's a problem. And I appreciate the earlier discussion we had at our last meeting, which and this is kind of for benefit of people who are listening, that the problem we're high centered on is that we as a state regulatory board we're sort of telling these federally regulated transportation systems, hey, this is okay. Well, we don't have the authority to do that because it's a federal issue, not a state issue. And I realize I'm kind of running around the tree here because the problem is that way. We are running around the tree. I don't see a clean solution in front of us right now. I wish we had one. But I'm not a big fan of repealing this either. And again, I wish we had a third option that was, would address the legitimate transportation issues while keeping us solid with federal law. But as long as it is federally illegal, I don't see how we're going to get there. So I'm not a big fan of repealing it. I recognize the flaws in what we currently have in place. I am wide open to suggestions.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? I had one question to the last commenter. This repeal does not change the handoff part of the changes we made. Is that correct, Ms. Wilson?
That is, sir. That was simply your interpretation of the current language,
right.
Not any change to regulation.
So this is specifically related to the airline transportation, and in Southeast, if the ferries ever run, they're regulated by the Coast Guard. So another federal agency that's pretty strict in terms of the ferry system. So, but I don't know about other marine transportation. So is there any other questions from board members?
Through the chair, this is Jaime. Oh, go ahead,
yes,
there, Nick.
Mr. Hyman.
For the attorney, so you guys vetted several different versions of language, and we couldn't find anything that would suffice to let this stay in place.
Is this Mr. Miller or Lieutenant Hardy?
It is,
Yeah,
sorry.
Mr. Miller.
Okay. Sir, I've vetted many options. As you know, our regulations are implicit in its use of language regarding how marijuana is currently transported. I attempted implicit language as well, rather than express, but still kept running against the same concerns, which I think are valid concerns. In this case, there's no person with a marijuana handler's permit who's going to be in charge of that product for a limited period of time. 2, we're expanding the scope of what carriers will be doing. And 3, in the end, if we really wanted a more of an accommodation, we would have to tell the governor why the current travel mandates are not achieving our aim, or the board's aim, of preventing the spread of COVID. to these small communities. For example, if you travel, Mr. Miller, which I think you've told me you've done, you're doing all you can now to keep the communities you go to safe. That might include wearing gloves, that might include wearing a mask, that it might include, social distancing. The question becomes is why is this additional step of leaving the project with a third party unattended necessary to achieve the travel mandate? And that was a question I could never answer because we don't have proof that the mandates are not working in preventing the spread of disease to these small communities. And if we did, we should be working with the governor's office to address that through the travel mandates, not necessarily through this regulation. I've spoken, as you know, to you and to industry representatives and to Ms. Welson as well. And believe me, every option that we discussed, I vetted, and this is where we come out at the Department of Law. I hear everything Mr. Schulte said. This is an area where we're always on this federal, state, legal, illegal line. I get it. I understand completely. I think the distinction here, however, is that we're not talking about the marijuana industry. We're talking about the related entity of transportation carriers. And while we can direct how the state's going to regulate marijuana licensees, we can't direct how the federal government is going to regulate our transportation carriers.
Mr. Jaime.
Yes, sir. I just want to kind of reiterate what Mr. Deschott said last week, that we seem to be having these emergency hearings every week now. The whole reopen, what is it called? Reopen responsibly by Alaska. The governor stated that soon they're going to be expanding the interstate travel. So a lot of these emergency hearings and these mandates that we're going off of are being repealed as we, daily or weekly at least. I don't think we really need to waste any more time, I shouldn't say waste, that's a poor term. We shouldn't dedicate any more time to this emergency regulation that we, constructed and follow the Department of Law's recommendation and repeal this issue. So thank you.
Okay. Is there any other comments? Is there a motion before the board? Okay, hearing none.
Well, actually, you cut out right there, so I couldn't hear anything.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know. I was asking if there's any other comments or if there was a motion before the board.
Bear with me, I'll make a motion to repeal, I guess it's section, and Ms. Wilson, please correct me if I'm wrong, section H of 306-750. Is that correct?
Mr. Lieutenant Jaime, I would say that the motion is to adopt the emergency regulation that is before you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the emergency regulation that's before the board.
And,
okay.
And also the emergency I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I should have said, and also the emergency findings as well.
And continuing with my motion to, what was that one? To continue with the
to adopt
findings?
the emergency findings as well, yes.
To adopt the emergency findings as well.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it just so we can move forward, Schulte.
Okay. Okay, so the motion before us, is there a discussion? Okay, hearing no discussion, I will call roll on the vote, and the vote is to adopt the emergency regulations and the emergency findings that are before us on this agenda. Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Schulte?
No.
Mr. Jaime?
Yes.
Mr. Deschott?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that's 3-2 vote to adopt the emergency regulations and findings that are before us. Is there any other business to come before the board or board member comments?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question for the board.
Ms. Wilson?
Yesterday at the ABC Emergency Board meeting, the board made a motion to request the governor to suspend the current requirement that the board meet in 4 judicial jurisdictions. I wondered if this board would like me to make the same request of the governor, at least for the period of the COVID emergency, which is November 15th, 2020, or earlier, should the governor terminate the emergency earlier.
Just for the board, some of the new members, part of our law requires us to meet in each 4 judicial districts once a year. We're also to meet at the same time and place as the ABC board so that staff don't have to move around. The director and I talked a couple days ago. We felt that the June meeting in Fairbanks probably would not take place in person, that we would probably do that via teleconference. Wasn't sure if the travel mandates would be released, whether or not people would feel comfortable traveling and being in a small conference area. And so the question I had asked the attorney was, should we have at least one person in Fairbanks to meet the requirements of meeting in the judicial district? A couple of you will remember a couple of years ago, maybe 3 now, weather kept all of us out of Nome. So we met one day by teleconference. The next day, the board chair flew to Nome, and we did the rest by teleconference, but we at least had one person in Nome to satisfy the requirement of meeting in the judicial district. I think it's a good idea to ask the governor to suspend that at least through this emergency so that there isn't any question from the public that we haven't fulfilled our duties. But so that's just some background for some of the newer members, and we welcome any comments from the board.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Casey DeShock.
Yes, Casey.
Just as we're thinking about the next meeting, it looks like the City Council of Dillingham. For right now, we have so we have a quarantine going through June, of which I wouldn't be able to return to Dillingham. I can leave Dillingham, but I can't return. That's extended through June. I think I just, you know, as we look at these things, the chance, if I'm required, I hope that if something comes out and I'm required to leave Dillingham, just understanding that I can't come back and enter into the workplace for 14 days, and that's just kind of the rules here. So just keeping that in mind through the summer.
Thank you. I know that you do. I know some others are thinking about it. And there's certainly some support for that even in my community of Juneau to extend if the governor loosens it. But so that was one of the reasons why I, when talking with the director, felt that probably the June meeting at least, I don't know about the August meeting, but the June meeting we would do by teleconference.
I appreciate that.
So I guess, Ms. Wilson, hearing nothing else from the board, I think it would be agreeable to include us in that since the statute really does tie us to the ABC board. We should be included in that request.
Very good. And I neglected to say that our emergency legislation, I think it's SB 241, permits the telephonic meetings that we've been having, but as you noted, Mr. Chair, it's the additional requirement that we be meeting in each judicial district that I want to get resolved to the board's satisfaction and to the laws, and to, you know, so we're not violating the law as well. So
I don't want to go through 2 days of teleconference and then have everything invalidated because we weren't
Right.
in a judicial district for once a year. So
I will be able to advance that request this week, and if I hear of any delay, I'll certainly let you and the director know, Mr. Chair.
okay, thank you. Is there anything else to come before the board today?
Through the chair.
Mr. Miller.
So the repeal action we just passed the board, how soon does that become effective?
Ms. Wilson.
Mr. Miller, through the chair, following this call, I'll work with Ms. Sawyer to deliver the emergency regulations to the Lieutenant Governor's office. They become effective upon his signature. So you are aware the last time we submitted emergency regulations to the Lieutenant Governor's office, they were signed the same day.
Okay, I was just concerned. As you know, transportation is pretty complex in the state, and there may be some shipments in transport. Mm-hmm. So the timing of that, I guess we'll have to deal with on a case-by-case basis.
Right. I mean, I would think enforcement is not going to take any action against individuals who are doing things that are currently permitted while in transit, but perhaps Chief Holscher, if he's on the line, might have thoughts about that, or the director.
Hi, this is Director Klinkert through the chair. Yeah, I don't think James is online, but I think you're absolutely right, Mr. Miller, that it's a case-by-case basis, and yeah, there's got to be some leeway. You know, people have already sent things, who are already expecting things. Those really need to get there and be done. I would just advise people that knowing that this is going to be signed in the next 24 hours to not be shipping things this way through these carriers come 24 to 48 hours after this.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other comments before the board? Okay, hopefully this will be our last meeting until June 10th. And I appreciate everything that be able to do the meetings as projected. All I can tell you is that our assembly is supposed to only meet once every 3 weeks, and I think we've had at least 10 meetings in the last 2 weeks. So it seems to be the time of the year, or the COVID. One impact of the COVID is increased my meetings. I can just tell you that. So anyway, if there's no other comments before the board, I appreciate everything. Appreciate the attorney getting this to us. Appreciate the testimony from the industry. And maybe we can work on this in the future. But anyway, if no other comments, I will adjourn the Marijuana Control Board meeting of Thursday, May 7th, 2020, adjourn at 11:37. So thank you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.